Welcome to Your Strata Property, the podcast for property owners looking for reliable, accurate, and bite-sized information from an experienced and authoritative source.
Hello and welcome to this week's podcast episode. I'm your host, Strata lawyer Amanda Farmer, and my guest this week is Scott Pearse. Scott is a registered design practitioner and the director of Tight Knit, a specialist renovation design practice. Focusing on apartment and apartment building renovations for the last 4 years, Scott has intimate knowledge of the processes, the pitfalls, and the opportunities of renovating in strata and community title buildings. In this chat, we talk about the impact of the Design and Building Practitioners Act, why it is so important for committees to understand when renovations require development consent, and what the biggest blockers are when it comes to owners getting approval for their renovations. I'll take you over now to my chat with Scott Pearse. Scott Pearse, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Amanda. Lovely to be here.
Pleasure to have you here with me today, Scott. Let's start here. Tell me a bit about you, how you came to be involved in Strata Reno projects. What was your intro to Strata?
Sure. As you said in your intro, I'm a registered design practitioner and a director of Tight Knit. So the business has actually been in operation for 4 years. You know, we just clocked up 4 years. And essentially when we started, which would have been sort of mid-COVID-ish, sort of start-ish of COVID, at that same time, the Design and Build Practitioners Act was coming into effect. We were seeing the first application of it around about the same time that the business started. So, of course, as you do when you're starting a new business, you're kind of looking for that niche in which you can start to attract clients and in an area that you want to practice in and try to gain knowledge that other people don't have, perhaps, because you're new to the market. And what I was experiencing is that of the people that I was talking to, if we go back to that time, sort of mid-COVID, it was a pretty popular time to renovate. People weren't able to go overseas. Mm-hmm. They weren't able to leave their houses. And so they were having a lot of thoughts about how they'd like to change that space. So there was a lot of inquiries during that period of time. And one that I kept getting again and again and again is, can you do Class 2 apartment renovations? And new to not really understanding, I was like, probably, sure, why not? And I would be like, well, why are you asking? And what I was experiencing is that people were going through these processes where they'd called 15 other people, right, and they were just getting no, I can't do that. And it was just because the legislation was so new and the pool of people that could actually do the work was very small. So they weren't the ones that were receiving the phone calls, evidently. It was everyone else. So that was the first thing that I sort of went, okay, there might be something here. Let's investigate this. But, you know, then the reason that I decided to jump in, because one could also think that, well, if everyone else is saying no, why would I be the person to say yes?
Yeah.
It's probably exactly. Like, but I sort of dug in, and I'm willing, you know, at that time I was willing to start saying yes to those projects. It's not the type of project that somebody would build a business around. Like, people don't necessarily want to work in these smaller apartment projects. And here I'm talking about homeowners, single occupancy unit renovations, right? Mm-hmm. They're just too small. They're too small for the majority of people to want to do them, you know. But for me, I live in a 54 square meter apartment in Bondi Beach, mm-hmm. and I love apartment building. I think apartment living is the way forward for persons like myself. I've only been back in Sydney for sort of 5 years. And prior to that, we were living up the coast in Smiths Lake, if anyone knows that, on the beautiful mid-north coast, just south of Foster. And, you know, had 2 acres, 5-bedroom house, chickens, veggie patches, pool, workshops, all that stuff. And basically, it was during COVID where we were like, hang on, is this how we want to live our lives? You know, is this working for us still? And evidently my wife and I are people of extremes. We went from the sort of hobby farm, you know, if you will, but down to a 54 square meter, 1-bedroom apartment.
Big change.
It is a big change. But I love not having to mow my lawns, you know. Yep. What a joy. And being close to publicly maintained facilities like we are when we're in the city, what I've come to realize by having that other experience, which was a beautiful time, you know, and more power to the people that make that their lifestyle. But This is who I am. I'm an apartment dweller, and so it would be remiss of me to when other apartment dwellers reach out for assistance in their projects to find those people that are able to help them. I need to be able to say yes. So that's where I'm at.
So tell me this, Scott. Tight Knit helps individual owners kind of from where to go. You know, they come to you saying, I've got this idea for this reno. I need design. I need plans. I need drawings. I need help applying to the Owners Corporation for approval. You guys help with the whole package. Have I got that right?
Indeed, yeah. We'll go from the very beginning of the process all the way through to tendering for the builder. We'll even walk through the construction just as the client's advocate, basically.
Yep.
As much service as the project needs, we are willing to offer at the end of the day. We want people to be able to come to us and for us to be able to guide them to the point where they're standing in a brand new apartment.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit about the need for this from your perspective. I mean, people are coming to you once they know that you exist, I suppose, and know you provide this service. Why? Because they're time poor, because they don't understand the process, because the law is complex, because their strata manager doesn't respond to them. I mean, all of the above. You might tell me what is it that they're coming to you complaining about?
The reality is, it is a complicated process, and at the very least, you need to explain to your strata what it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that is, of course, through architectural plans or even visualizations. We do a lot of applications where we provide those sort of 3D photorealistic images of kind of what's going on, just to help. Basically, it's a complicated process. People sort of don't know where to start. And the worst part about it, of course, is that most of this work of educating people is falling on strata managers. So basically, you've got strata managers who aren't being paid essentially to educate people on how to navigate these processes, doing that work. And so they're leaving the clients just as confused
Yeah.
as if they didn't have someone, and quite rightly, because it's not the strata manager's job. And so, yeah, that's where we really provide value, I think, is it's just like if you need somebody to help you understand the process, or if you need somebody to do the process for you in collaboration with you, I think that's where we provide the most value. But, we've seen a little bit of everything. We've got clients that come to us who are like, we just need these documents that the strata managers asked for to get us through OC approval, all the way through to kind of like, we've got no time. Can you please do this for us?
Yep. Great. Now, you mentioned straight up there, Scott, the Design and Building Practitioners Act, that now well known in our listener circles, I think, piece of legislation that is haunting many of us
Yep.
in Strata. How do you see that legislation impacting individual apartment owners now, and how are you interacting with it when you're working for these individuals?
Yeah. First off, to say, the Design and Build Practitioners Act was probably necessary. Something needed to be done in relation to, we see the mascot towers and we see those sorts of things. I mean, that's essentially what happened. There was those issues in the construction industry, and the Design and Build Practitioners Act is what was devised by the building commissioner to address those issues. And the issue really is, it's about accountability. It's about, if something goes wrong, who is on the hook. But in all the training that I've done to become a design practitioner, which is what you need to be to make declarations under the Design and Build Practitioners Act, which is to say to draw drawings that can help you navigate this process, there was not one mention of how this would impact alterations and additions, renovations.
Yep.
And whether that be in single occupancy units, so homeowners units, or whether it be for the entire building, and we're looking at a lot of the, the waterproofing remedial work that people are having to do and things like that. It felt like the whole act has been written to apply to putting up a new tower block.
Yep.
And so that's really where a lot of these issues are coming from. Like, I'm working on apartment renovations for people that have various budgets, from $100,000 to, we've got one at the moment that's just over $1 million and of build cost. And yet we're having to go through a same process essentially as another application would if it were like a 40-story apartment building. Those same rules, those same legislations, those same processes are being applied. And so it's just made the cost has skyrocketed of going through the proper channels, of going through a proper consent. And what we're talking about there is sort of a CDC process, a complying development. Sometimes we have to go through DA because there's heritage considerations or something like that. So going through those processes has just become so much more expensive. And it's become expensive because there is now a requirement for so many more design practitioners, building practitioners, all these different people to sign off. It's become a real industry of what I like to say, sort of $2,000 pieces of paper. You need
Right.
to go and get somebody. I get this long list of all these $2,000 pieces of paper that I have to go and get, and that inevitably the client pays for.
And do you think that's overkill for reno projects, for what are essentially improvement projects that individual owners want to do? Do they really need those $2,000 pieces of paper?
I mean, when we're doing simple things, of course, it feels like no. But even simple things, when we're living in a shared asset, when we're living in apartment buildings, when something goes wrong, the paper trail, the places where people have signed their name to their work, the people, like myself, where I've signed that my designs are compliant, for homeowners to be able to go back and find a person for the insurance company to go chase for that money and things like that. And that's essentially what the Design and Building Practitioners Act is about. It's about accountability. It's about documenting things correctly so that we sort of, do we need the $2,000 piece of paper then? It's hard to say, like, we haven't got a better system.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, often it feels like, I've had one recently where I was being asked to provide electrical engineering for new PowerPoints. Like, this is just bog standard putting PowerPoints in, and there you go. It wasn't quite a $2,000 piece of paper, but it was, I think, $1,500 to go find an electrical engineer that is a design practitioner and that will even look at this, because all the people that are design practitioners are tending to work in those huge towers. That's the other real impact here, is that there's just not that many people that want to work on projects at this scale.
Yep.
And that's the issue that we've faced through our first probably 2 years of existence and really focusing on these projects, is building that network of other consultants that will say yes to these things and will still do a good job, because most people, they're not interested in selling $2,000 pieces of paper. They're trying to work on bigger projects and sell $20,000 pieces of paper. So that's been a real challenge, and probably why the costs have gone up so much too, because the pool of people that can actually work in these projects who are design and who are building practitioners is relatively small. And then there's an even smaller subset of those people who are trying to work on projects in class 2, in renovations essentially.
So just to clarify, Scott, what is it that is bumping these lot owner reno projects into this category of needing to be Design and Building Practitioners Act compliant? Is it because they need DAs? Is it they're affecting waterproofing? I mean, some of our listeners might be thinking, hang on, if I'm doing some electrical work, is Scott telling me I need to have a design practitioner to change my PowerPoints? Like, what's the difference between those two levels of work?
Pretty simply, exempt or complying development, really, or above that, the requirement for a DA. So exempt development covers a lot of things that would be typical in an apartment renovation. What we really see mostly that knocks us into the complying development category, and as soon as you've exited exempt development, you have to go through a process. You have to go through the CDC process with a private certifier, or sometimes you have to even go into DA if you've got a heritage overlay on your building, or there can be a number of things that kick it in there. So we could just start with exempt development. As far as the things that really knock typical apartment renovations out is touching a wall. Most people, most apartments, projects that we deal with, inevitably people want to take down a wall that probably divided the kitchen and the living room and sort of create a bit of connection between those space. Yeah, that's 80% of our projects, I would say. That's one of the things that's going on. And what exempt development says is that if there is a change of arrangement, whether by the removal of a wall, and it's got a couple of other clauses, so that's one of the things. As soon as you're touching a wall and changing the arrangement of the apartment, you are into a CDC, you're into complying development. There's still a lot of grey area around sort of the bathroom thing, but it does say in there to renovate a bathroom. Okay, so does renovating a bathroom mean that if you've got 2 bathrooms and you're doing both, suddenly are you into CDC? It can be a very grey area, the exempt development, and different practitioners will see it different ways.
Very
different
frustrating.
Different certifiers will see it different ways. Different, owners corporations can see it different ways. So yeah, there's not a lot of consistency about how that's applied. But that's one of the first things we do when we're trying to work with people is we're like, okay, let's understand what you're trying to achieve here and see if we can do it under exempt development.
Yeah.
And then, okay, if they get to the point where they're like, no, absolutely, we need to remove this wall, then I'm like, okay, cool. Well, here are the costs and here's the timelines of going out and getting that approval.
Yep. And all of a sudden, maybe the wall can stay.
Sometimes we get there, yeah.
Yeah. Scott, what do you see as the biggest roadblocks when owners are trying to get the owners corporation to approve their renos?
Delay in response a lot of the time from
Yep.
strata manager and OC. I know that we've seen some new legislation come in that hopefully will hasten that. If we don't hear anything, then it's an instant approval in some circumstances. We'll see how that starts to play out. But at the end of the day, this is what I say to people is that getting through your owner's corporation, getting your strata approval, is a very political process. Whereas if I'm going through a CDC, one of the government processes, we have to abide by legislation, and it's not entirely consistent, but there's relative consistency in that process. Whereas in OC, essentially people can refuse your apartment renovation because they don't like the way that you recycle.
Yeah.
They might have seen you putting paper in the red bin, and that can lead to a refusal from one vote. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, you've only got to carry, what are we talking, 75% generally of
Yep.
and that's only if it's major works. But yeah, it's the length of time and just the number of people that you have to kind of appease, and as I said at the top of this, we're more than happy to come in and help people from go to woe. That's one of the services that we offer. But what we never do is advocate for the design to the other owners on behalf of the owner, because it is such a political process. Every time we put the owner in there, we need the owner talking to the other owners like people. The last thing that they want is me in there trying to convince them that this is all good. I'm more than happy to attend and offer colour commentary and certainly advise on the processes and what I understand those to be. But what we really always need is owners talking to other owners. That's the way that a strata actually functions when it's functioning well.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you raised that, because those are the words that I'm telling my clients many days of the week, and saying this is not a legal issue, this is not a legal process, this is a political process, and you need to campaign, you need to lobby, you need to gather support, and do that ahead of the general meeting where your bylaw for your major works project is on the agenda. Go and knock on those doors, email those investor owners who may not be there, introduce yourself, let them know what it is that you're wanting to do and how it will impact them, how it will add value to everybody's property. And I see owners where, a proposal's looking a bit borderline. The ones that get across the line are the ones who are the owners who are willing to do that extra work, and they recognize that political game. So yeah, I agree completely.
Yeah, I mean, the applications that I see get refused the most are always people who have just purchased and then 3 weeks into their ownership have lobbed a major works, called an EGM for major works.
Or they've just started without the approval and then they're scrambling to get retrospective approval. Can we keep going, please? Yeah, not a great place to start in a new community.
That's right, yeah. So, I mean, everybody wants to rush in and start swinging hammers, like that's always everybody's anxiety and what they really want to get going on. But yeah, I mean, the smoothest applications are always the one when somebody's maybe lived there for a year and they've been contributing positively to the strata and the maintenance of the building, or it's just goodwill.
Yep.
At the end of the day, goodwill really, you're going to cause a lot of disruption as well. Like, it's unavoidable that there's going to be a lot of disruption from you chipping the tiles off your bathroom, the jackhammering and all those sorts of things. And so, yeah, it is so worthwhile to go out there and make sure that you have smooth the waters as best you can, and people can see that you are acting in the best interest of the building, where you're not trying to pull a Swiftie on anyone or, act in your own best interest, that you do have every consideration for others.
Yeah. And what about those people who go ahead and do work without first getting approval? I mean, we hear about, and I certainly do, hear about situations where, there's a noise, there's drilling, somebody says, oh, they're lifting the tiles up, this has been going on all day, emails to the strata manager, what's going on? Have you been involved in those situations before? And do you have any recommendations for our owners? How do you tell the difference between work or noise that might be going on that could be unapproved, or, someone's just putting a bookshelf up and that's okay?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, you'll know it if people are lifting tiles. It's it's very noisy. But yeah, I think it's such a difficult thing because I live in a strata building as well, and I hear somebody, doing something and suddenly I'm all, nosy neighbor, what's going on in there? And or they haven't been through the correct process. It's hard because this is a shared asset. You know what I mean? Like if
Yep.
somebody's going to go lift the tiles and then affect their waterproofing and it floods someone else, like this is your strata insurance, your premiums, like it affects you. And so you're well within your rights, but there is always that point too, isn't there, where it's like, okay, just let people live. Like that's a part of strata living too, is kind of like finding that balance between being terrified for your shared asset and letting people enjoy their peaceful enjoyment. But yeah, I'd certainly draw the line when people are jackhammering tiles. So if you've got to skip out the front and people are going backwards
It's
and
a good
forwards with
hint.
lots of, yeah, that is a good hint. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's just tough. Okay, so first of all, you'd want to inform your strata and the other owners committee that somebody's doing works. As far as I'm concerned, if it feels like it's substantial anyway, just because you don't want tradesmen coming in and out of your common areas without it being protected, and you can almost be certain that if they've just gone ahead, there's no homeowner's warranty insurance there. There's a reason we've got these processes, and the reason is not to slow people down and stop them from doing what they want. Like the point of the processes is to approve building. That's what all of our processes are about. It's to approve building so that people can do what they want. But yeah, that risk, the part of the system is to protect everybody. Part of the system is to make sure that people are on the hook if something goes wrong and the correct certifications in place. Blah, blah. So it is a fine line, but it should be fairly obvious if someone's knocking down a wall. You'll see someone with buckets going backwards and forwards to a skip out the front. So
Yeah. And really, any type of major work, there should be notice given certainly to the strata committee via the strata manager, whether that then gets passed on to the residents to let them know this is the date it's starting. That's a matter for the building. It should be,
yeah,
there should be signs put up. There's going to be noisy work. If you haven't had any of that, have a look in the minutes of recent committee meetings, recent general meetings to see has there been a bylaw approved and we didn't turn up to the meeting so we're not aware of it. Sometimes people do jump the gun and say what's going on because they just haven't been engaged and paying attention.
and people don't know the process.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like these aren't professionals in the apartment renovation space. They haven't probably thoroughly read the documentation that there's actually, this is all supposed to be in with the strata manager 2 weeks before commencement. There needs to be a commencement email issued by the strata manager and all these sorts of things. And to be honest, the reality is that a lot of people get away with it too.
Yes,
And so
that's
it's
right.
hard to, when there's no enforcement and the people are getting away with it, it's difficult to motivate people to go through those proper channels. And of course, when I say they're getting away with it, what I mean is that they're doing the work. They're opening themselves up to a whole world of risk by not going through the proper processes. And so, they might get away with it while they're doing it or those sorts of things, but the long-term risk for the building and specifically for that owner is pretty high.
Many of our listeners, Scott, are committee members and I know are always happy to hear about any red flags that they should be aware of when they're looking at renovation applications. Now, you did just touch on the new law in New South Wales, which requires a committee, if the committee has been delegated the authority to approve minor work, to do that within a 3-month time period and let the owner know if the application is refused, why it is refused within that 3 months. If that doesn't happen, as you've said, then the application is deemed approved. So our committees really do need to be on top of these applications now. Any red flags, common things that you suggest that they look out for, questions they should be asking before they give the okay?
Yep. What I would say is that what I would love to see New South Wales wide is that there is an assessment. Maybe this could be built into the minor renovation clause. It could just basically be in the constitution of each OC that there is a review undertaken by somebody of some type of qualification, whether that be a building designer like myself, an architect, a town planner. We've got BCA consultants. We've got a lot of professionals that could undertake these reviews, and there has to be a certificate provided by the person doing the renovation saying that this has been reviewed and this is exempt development.
Right.
I've never seen it. I've never seen a requirement for that. I mean, I've certainly offered that service in the past. I wouldn't consider it a huge cost because this is essentially what's happening. You're having a number of people who have no idea about what exempt or complying development looks like, really. They're not trained and educated in those sorts of ways, who are then giving approval. And I often worry about, well, what are the strata managers leaving themselves open to? What's the OCs leaving themselves open to? Obviously it's a challenging environment for those people. So that is I would love to see that built into more processes where it's just a simple review.
Yeah. From a legal perspective, that is something that a committee could build in to their approval process. They don't need a clause in the legislation allowing them to. It can be a reasonable condition of approval that you, owner, present us with a certificate from a qualified person, whoever that may be, as you say, confirming that this is exempt development. I've certainly seen bylaws, I've drafted bylaws that have clauses in there that require the owner to get all approvals that may be necessary, including approval under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act, approval under the Design and Building Practitioners Act. I mean, we put that into the bylaws, but this is a step further, right? This is requiring the applicant owner to be proactive in providing you, the committee, with written confirmation that this is exempt development and no other approvals are required. So yeah, I love that as an idea.
Yeah, precisely. And exactly that. Like every one of the bylaws that I've ever interacted with that we've put in for our projects, they all have that exact clause, basically all applicable, planning consents. And it becomes at that stage, usually the OC signed off on the project, right? And so it's essentially the strata manager that's issuing that commencement consent, because in the bylaw it will say you need to deliver us all necessary permits and all that sort of stuff, builder's insurance, like that's in the typical standard renovation bylaw. And then it becomes incumbent upon the strata manager to review that all those documents have been received. And then suddenly the strata manager has issued a commencement, right? It's like the strata manager hasn't, have they looked to see if all applicable planning consents are there?
Yeah. Or the owner just says, no, there's no applicable consents required. So we go, oh, okay. Just accept
that's
that.
Right, exactly. And so we're really operating in this grey area that could be very quickly rectified by just having the requirement for somebody knowledgeable to have a look and be like, no, actually, this needs to go through. If they want to do this part of the work, this needs to go through a CDC. That's the law.
Yep. I like that. And no doubt we've got a few listeners out there, maybe a small handful, who are thinking, yep, that's what we do, Amanda. That's what we require in our building. Feel free to post a comment under this episode on the website if that's what you're doing. I would love to hear from you. Scott, you are a font of knowledge in this area. Where can our listeners go to connect with you, find out more about what you do, use your services if they need to?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn quite a lot talking about all this stuff. So you can find me on all sorts of channels. We can find you on Facebook, on Instagram, and then on LinkedIn under my name, Scott Pearse, or under the business name, Tight Knit Building Design. We've got a website, so tightknitbuildingdesign.com is another place to go, or you can pretty much go into your Google Maps, type in Tight Knit Building Design there as well, and you'll show up that our office is in Bondi Junction. And you can find a way to our website from there and get in contact with us. You can schedule I offer a phone call to anyone who wants to have a phone call. You just need to hit on the website and you'll be getting to meet my beautiful pot plant here, and we'll have this conversation in private.
Fantastic. I love it. Well, thank you for providing this service to our strata owners in a space that others have hesitated perhaps to step into. Thank you for your time chatting here today.
Thanks, Amanda. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Your Strata Property, the podcast which consistently delivers to property owners reliable and accurate information about their strata property. You can access all the information below this episode via the show notes at yourstrataproperty.com.au.